Nombre es Maureen.
I'm going to start the presentation in Spanish. My name is Mari. Sorry, I'm going to start it again. Hello, everyone. My name is Mari, and I come from the clinic.
Gracias por venir.
And thank you so
Estaremos
much for
hablando
being
hoy en este
here. We're
taller
going
de
to
las
be talking
diferentes
today
dimensiones de la
in our
participación de
workshop
los miembros en tu
um,
cooperativa. Se
how to
pueden avanzar,
participate in the
diapositiva.
foundation of workplace democracy as a member.
Perfecto.
So if we could
Querría
pass.
enfatizar que
I
ofrecemos
would
este
like
tipo de
to
taller para que
emphasize that we're
puedas
offering this type of
reflexionar sobre
workshop
el
so we
nivel
can
de
uh,
participación en tu cooperativa
understand
y
how
aprender de
we
otras
can
cooperativas
be
sobre
more
cómo han
involved in our
afrontado
co-op and
situaciones
how
similares.
other co-ops are affected in similar ways
Estaremos
as
aquí
yours.
con
And
el
we will
apoyo
be
de
here
nuestro
with the support
patrocinador,
of our
National
promoters,
Cooperative Bank,
sponsors, the
que mi
National
oficina
Cooperative
está
Bank,
cerca
and
del
they
webinar. Se tiene
sponsor this
el
webinar.
NCB por sus siglas en inglés.
Also, it's called
Es una
NCB
institución que
for
ofrece
English in
productos y
English, and
servicios
it provides
bancarios y
banking products and
cooperativas a
services
sus
to
miembros y
cooperatives and their
organizaciones
members and
socialmente
socially
responsables de
responsible
todo el país.
organizations
Si
nationwide.
después de esa sesión
If
de
after
hoy
this
estás
section,
interesada en
today's
recibir la
session,
ayuda
you will be
emocional
interested
y
on
especializada
receiving
sobre
additional
este
support,
tema
and
de
especially to
participación de
learn
los
more about
miembros,
this topic,
pueden
um,
trabajar con nuestro
you
equipo de
can
la clínica
work
cooperativa.
with
Tenemos un par
our
de
team
asesores
from the
pares
co-op,
y
and
para
we have a few
programar una
people
cita
that
con
can are
nosotros
available. So for you
y
to claim
obtener más
an
información,
appointment with
cada
us and
clic
to
en
receive
el
more
enlace que
information,
mi
please click
compa
on the
acaba
link
de poner
that
en el chat.
my
Y
um,
recuerda que vamos por
partner
desorientación.
Matt
Si
just
tienes
dropped on
alguna
the chat. And
pregunta, se la
so
puedes compartir
before
en el
we
chat.
continue, I
Y
want
cuando
you to
llegue
know
la
that if you have
sección de
any
preguntas y
questions, you can drop
respuestas,
in
lo
any
vamos a revisar
of your
juntos.
questions in the chat, and when it's time for
Como
Q&As, we
acabo de
can definitely
mencionar,
respond to your
pertenezco a la
questions.
clínica
As I
cooperativa y a la
mentioned, I
federación.
belong to
Ojalá que
the
ustedes ya sepan que la Federación
U.S.
de
Federation
Cooperativas
Worker
es la
Cooperative,
única organización nacional de
USFWC, is
base
the only
de las
national
cooperativas
grassroots
de
membership
trabajadores
organization
en los
for
Estados
worker
Unidos.
cooperatives in the
Nuestra
USA.
misión es
Our mission
construir
is to
un
build
movimiento
a
cooperativo
thriving
próspero de
cooperative
puestos de
movement of
trabajo
stable,
estables
empowering
y
jobs
moderados
through
a través de
worker
la propiedad de los
ownership.
trabajadores, ustedes. Promovemos los
We
lugares de
advance
trabajo, propiedad de
worker-owned,
los
managed,
trabajadores,
and
gestionados
governed
y gobernados a través de la educación, la
through
defensa
cooperative
y el desarrollo
education,
de las
advocacy, and
cooperativas.
development.
Gracias por defender el
Thank you
movimiento una
for
vez más.
being an advocate for this
La
movement.
clínica cooperativa, como se puede
The
ver,
technical assistance
es
and
nuestra
training in the
rama
Co-op
de
Clinic
servicios de
is
apoyo
one of
técnico
the supporting
a través de
services
una
that
red de
we are
asesores.
offering through a
Si
network
ya han
of peer
escrito en la
advisors. If
membresía de la
you
federación,
have
pueden
already
contar con
been
apoyo
a member,
consistente
you
para
will then know
contestar
that you
preguntas y
receive
por referidos.
support
Pueden
regularly for
contar con
questions and
tarifas
referral
reducidas en
requests.
proyectos con nuestra red de
You will receive
asesores y
reduced
pueden
rates for
contar con
projects with our
acceso
peer
a talleres
advisor
y
network,
programación
and
de
you will
apoyo
also
técnico
have
en
access to
talleres.
regular
Tal
technical
como esa
assistance
sesión se
workshops and
gratuita,
resources,
también tenemos
such
una
as the one that we're
colección
just
de
doing today.
mini guías que se
And
pueden
there's
acceder
also guides,
en esos
small guides that you
enlaces
can
en la
access
esquinita.
through the links that we're
Entonces,
offering in the
em,
slides. So,
vamos hoy
so
a
today
conversar
we
sobre
are
la
going to talk
participación de los
about
miembros.
the
Pueden
participation of the
avanzar,
members.
Janet,
Um,
porfis.
if we could
Em,
please move to the next slide.
Vamos a tener de esta sesión
So
porque Matt
we're
acaba de
going to
lanzar
hold this session because
a la
Matt
membería
just
más nueva
um,
que se puede
started
ver
the
ahí, se
newest
puede
membership
acceder
that
a
you can
través de
see
los
here,
enlaces
and
que
you can
ustedes van a
access through
recibir
the links that you will
después
be
de la
receiving
sesión.
in the
Se
follow-up
puede ver
email.
tiempo y también
And
queremos
also,
mencionar que 8
we
recursos
wanted
que
to
se
mention
pueden
the many of the
utilizar
resources that
para
are available
enfrentar
and
este
you can
tema
use so you can know
es
more about this
una
topic.
herramienta que se lo
It's
hizo
a great
Iberia, que
tool
es una
that
de las
was
cooperativas que vamos a entrevistar hoy.
created by one of the
Hicieron
cops
una
that we're going
herramienta
to
sobre
interview today, and
presupuestos
it's a tool
participativos
for
y hacemos ese
budgeting,
tipo de
and
sesión para que ustedes puedan
we
ver cuáles son
actually offer
realmente
this
las
type of
herramientas que las
workshop so you
cooperativas
understand
ofrecen
what are the
en
tools
sus
that
vidas
you can
reales, en sus
use
negocios
in the
reales.
co-ops, in your
Así
real
que
lives, in
hoy
your
vamos a
real
conversar de
workplaces.
los
So
motivos de
today
participar,
we're going to express the
los
reasons
motivos
why
de faltar de
we think that you
participar y
should be
cuáles son algunas
participating,
herramientas que tu
and also the
cooperativa
reasons
pueda
why other cops
utilizar.
feel that they shouldn't
Em,
they're not
Bienvenido, Seba,
participating,
lo
and
he
how
utilizado
we can
antes.
offer tools so they can
Trabajadores.
really get involved and get other
En
workers
lo
involved.
siguiente se puede
The
ver
next slide
¿Quién tenemos hoy?
You can see who do we
Ya
have
mencioné, mi
today
nombre
here.
es Maureen,
I
vivo
already
con mi
mentioned
hijo.
my name is
Voy a pasar el
Maureen. I live in
micrófono
New
a Matt
Mexico, and I'm
para que
gonna
le
pass it to
presente
Matt so
y a
he can
Kate y a
introduce
Holly para que
himself,
saluden más.
as well as Holly and Maureen and Kate. Sorry, Kate and Holly.
Hello, I am Matt. I'm with the Co-op Clinic at the US Federation of Worker Cooperatives. I use he, him pronouns, and I've been part of a few worker co-ops myself, and now I'm here supporting worker co-ops. I'm very excited to talk about member engagement today. I'll pass it to Kate to say hi briefly. Available?
Hi, my name is Kate. My pronouns are she and they. My job title is I am the Humane Resources Coordinator at AORTA. AORTA is an anti-oppression training, facilitation, consulting, and coaching cooperative.
Holly, would you like to say hi real quick?
Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, my name's Holly. I use she, her pronouns. I am an interpreter and part of a language justice cooperative called COMPA based in Philadelphia. Thank you very much for asking me to be part of this.
Gracias a ustedes. Me da mucho gusto
Thank you
saber
all.
que
Such a
los
pleasure to
miembros
know
o los
that
miembros de una
the
cooperativa están
members of a
presentes
co-op
para
are
dar
present here
parte
so they can
em,
give their
llenando toda la
input in
experiencia de cómo
having all the
realmente
experience of
es
how
vivir y trabajar
what
con
is
una
it like
cooperativa.
living and working for a co-op.
En la siguiente diapositiva
The
van a ver
next
que vamos a
slide, you will
discutir
see that we are going to discuss
muchas
and talk
distintas dimensiones
about
de la
many
participación de los
dimensions of
miembros.
the participation of the members.
Vamos a discutir
We
cómo
are
se puede
going to
preparar tipos de
talk about
información
how we can
para
prepare some
tener
types of
y comenzar
information
con
so
claridad
we can start
las
with
reuniones en
clearly and
cooperativa.
transparency
Después vamos a tener
the
una
meetings.
sección de preguntas y
Then we're going to
respuestas
have a
profundizando el tema.
session of
Vamos a pasar
questions and answers, a round of
a
questions, and
toma
then
de
we will pass
decisiones y
into
transparencia. Y
decision
ahí
making.
voy a conversar con
And
Holly
there I will
para que
be
ella
talking
pueda
with Holly.
compartir un poco de su experiencia en
So
Compa.
he's going to
De
be
nuevo
sharing
vamos
his
a tener
experience at Compa,
un
and
pequeño
then
ronda de
we are
preguntas y
going to
respuestas.
have another
Vamos
round
a
of questions
discutir
and answers, and we
nuestra
will be
alimentación
talking
y evaluación de
about
miembros. De nuevo, ronda de
um,
preguntas y
root.
respuestas.
There
Vamos a
will be another
platicar de
round of
cultura y
questions and
conexión.
answers. We're going to be talking about
Ya
culture and
ustedes
connection.
saben, vamos a
You
tener una
already
ronda de
know that we
preguntas y
are going to have
respuestas
a
y
lot of
vamos a cerrar
rounds of questions and answers, and then we're
con
going to
causas
close
fundamentales de la
with
falta de
root causes of
participación.
disengagement.
Mientras que vamos avanzando, pueden
So as
compartir sus
we move
preguntas en el
on
chat,
in
las
this
puede
session, you
leer
can
en voz
definitely
alta
share
para que
your
sean
questions
implementadas
in the chat. You can
y
also say them
efectivas.
out loud so they can be interpreted.
Voy a pasar del
And
micrófono a
I'm going
Matt
to
para
pass
que
the
pueda
mic
empezar
to
con
Matt so he
un
can
poco de
start
explicación de dónde
and explain a
salió
little
este
bit
mini guía y
where
qué
these
significa
organizations come from
información
and what this
piensa con
information
claridad.
means
Great,
and
thank you,
what start
Maureen.
with clarity means.
I'll be
Thank
starting
you,
in Spanish, in
Maureen.
English today. And yeah, as Maureen said, please, yeah, put comments, resources, questions in the chat. We feel free to use that space. We'll be bringing in whenever it makes sense. And yeah, for many years, we've been hearing about co-ops that come to a point in their existence or even early stages looking for, you know, challenges, best practices, resources, strategies to really engage membership. And there's so much material out there around engaging members in many kinds of organizations and workers in many kinds of businesses on the operations side, right? On the shop floor, on the work you're doing as a co-op. But there's something specific about worker co-ops needing to do ongoing member engagement on the governance side, on the decision making, on the involvement in the what makes a member, right? And so we explored this. We talked to a lot of groups to see how they did some approaches, what were some of the underlying issues that might be causing disengagement. And we built a short mini guide that we put out this year. And we're excited to share that with you all and some of the findings from that, and hear some concrete stories from the folks today. And where we wanted to start really is around information, starting with clarity, starting from the very beginnings of explaining, how someone can be involved in the cooperative, understanding what their rights and responsibilities are as prospective members, as people applying for a job that could then be a member track position. Being clear, this is not just a job. This is an opportunity to be a member owner of a business, and that's what it means to be engaged. And there's some expectations that come along with that, right? There's some responsibilities, but also being clear on the right side. And so orientation from the job descriptions all the way through to uh, your orientation when a person starts in your co-op to when they are really engaged in the member track activities, whether you have educational expectations or engagement in certain kinds of annual meetings or member meetings or things like that. And then on finances, more and more people being involved in making financial decisions with the co-op. And at the same time, we felt, we heard that having tangible benefits, not just profit sharing, but better working conditions, the access to, learning opportunities, that those be really clear. Like as a member, you get these additional components in our co-op. So clarity from the beginning is one thing we wanted to share. And I just wanted to share some experiences with that. And this is from 20 years ago, but we ran a co-op called Toxic Soil Busters Co-op. It was a youth-led cooperative here in Worcester, Mass. And a nonprofit was really holding a lot of the financial control, right? And youth would come on and they would have a certain amount of say and an increasing amount, and they would be invited to the board, or they could run for the board, be nominated and run for the board and be elected. But we saw a lot of turnover, and it's not just because it was youth in high school. There were certain things still held on to by the nonprofit and the kind of adult staff that were not really members of the co-op. And that wasn't made clear from the beginning. And we tried many years to try to shift that. And there was still this kind of turnover and challenge that we found around participation in full decisions. So we kind of learned from that when we built another youth cooperative that I was a member of for 10 years called Future Focus Media Co-op. And for this one, it was its own legal entity. There were still youth involved. There was a 16-year-old president who was on, the main signer on the bank account. We had a really clear $200 membership fee, that was clear when people were joining. We made it really accessible. They had to take 50 of that 200 out of their paycheck or pay it in cash, and then they could work off the other 150 with payroll deductions. But they really saw they were buying into a co-op. And we had also, as you can see in the slide, regular co-op governance workshops, right? We did it on sometimes twice a year, sometimes a little bit more. And we saw a much better kind of buy-in, and we had some of our members, or a lot of our members stayed, 4, 5, 6 years, even as they, graduated high school and got involved in lots of different things. Their lives shifted. They stayed involved in the cooperative in really meaningful ways. So that was a shift. We said clarity from the beginning. This is how you get involved. And one way to do this really is doing workshops around rights and responsibilities. And it's not such a hard thing to run a rights and responsibilities workshop. So let's do a mini one right now. So we need your participation, please. Um, what, so let's, when we talk about rights and responsibilities, we want them sort of balanced, right? So if we're talking about financial participation, what comes to mind in terms of rights for financial participation? Feel free to come off mute, put it in the chat. What kind of rights around financial participation might be there? Oh, yeah. The answers are there in Spanish for bilingual folks. All right. Yeah. Profit sharing, right? So that's a right. And what might balance out that on the responsibility side? Financial updates. Yeah. So financial, that could be there in financial participation or information. That could go either place there. Yeah. What else? The one I just mentioned, right? The responsibility to pay a fee could be, right? Membership fee. Thank you. Yeah. So balancing out, like, is this right? This profit sharing right, a good balance to the responsibilities we're asking, right? Is the amount we're asking for a membership fee in good balance with the amount that they could potentially, benefit as a right to profit sharing, things like that. And balancing it out. This again is for full members of your cooperative. So maybe in interest of time, I'll just share some of the um, other thoughts we have. But you can do this exercise with your co-op in lots of different, phases, in early stages and in ongoing education workshops. And, you can put out many more categories than we have here. But for education, right, you have the educational opportunities, but on the other side, you'll have the responsibility to educate yourself and others, right? Pass on education, be active, right? Leadership development and ongoing education is the key to flexing the muscle of like real uh, participation in decisions, right? So the next one, governance, you have the right to run for the board, but you have the responsibility to vote and to take part in this autogestión, in this self-management, self-governance, right? And you can't really do that without the educational component if they're and without the information. If information is all held in a small cadre or just one or two people, then it's hard to really share the full decision-making rights. And again, for information, there should be very explicit and clear access to bylaws, policies, financial information as it makes sense for your co-op to be sharing, as someone else mentioned. And then you have that responsibility to have some transparency. This is how much, I make now as a 10, person who's been at the co-op 10 years and has had my salary go up, etc. Have that transparency. Great. So that's what I wanted to share in this section. I think we have a few more minutes for questions, answers, additional materials, suggestions. Yeah, internal financial policies and budgets, right. So engagement in those are really key. Thanks, Maureen. Any other questions or stories people want to share around this clarity component?
I can share one thing I'm seeing at the co-ops that I worked at that sometimes some training is required. So I mean sharing reports, being transparent, but sometimes folks need the step before that, which is training, right? To how to read a report, what is a balance sheet, what are all those lines on the balance sheet, which I think is one of the hardest parts to understand. So yeah, I think integrating that in some way or bringing in resources from the outside and knowing that finances is so hard to educate people on. And I'm still trying to find like the best way to teach folks. But I would say, yeah, that's been one challenge that I faced. Check.
For sure. What are some people's favorite financial literacy resources or approaches out there? Anyone you want to shout out? A bookkeeping cooperative runs great trainings. I know that's one. Any others people want to shout out? The Colmenar Cooperative has come out with a great Spanish language at colmenar.coop finance. Yeah. Guía financiera, gracias. ICA groups guides are good for a certain audience for sure. They go in depth on patronage and membership responsibilities. Yeah. And yeah. Great. Well, that's a good start on this topic. I'll pass it back to Maureen then, probably to take it into decision making. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. I'm gonna switch to English
Voy a cambiar a
and say
inglés.
that I'm particularly excited to have Holly from an interpretation co-op here because the Federation, including today's webinar, often hires our interpretation co-ops to provide interpretation, but we don't often get the chance to also spotlight them as worker owners with knowledge and experience in how to be in a cooperative. So it was really exciting to get to offer a different kind of opportunity today. And I think in particular, because interpretation co-ops share a lot of similarities with other industries where the workers are potentially doing independent gigs. They're not necessarily all sharing a shop floor. You're not live interpreting in one room. You don't always get to see each other's work or see how jobs went or how they were delegated or paid or what counted as prep. So I'm really curious to hear how decision making and transparency works in your co-op, Holly. And I was going to ask if you could introduce what role you've had, how long you've been there, and what your meetings are like. Are they efficient?
Yeah. Um, well, I was looking over the question about participatory, efficient, and sorry, what was the other one in the notes?
Respectful.
And then respectful. Yeah, so definitely respectful, definitely participatory. And I would say that like efficiency is maybe where we struggle because I think that our the four of us that started Compa, who are the right now the only four member owners, it's we're friends and we started this co-op sort of as like a project that was really built on um uh, our interest in working specifically with each other. It was the kind of thing that wasn't if it wasn't we wouldn't be doing it if we weren't the four of us. It was, I think, the only reason that we were the four of us interested and able and willing to put this energy in was that we already knew that we got along well, that we shared a vision, and that um, we really prioritize our relationships with each other kind of first as the foundation of the work that not necessarily the interpretation work, but the forming of the co-op is really based on our love and respect for each other. And so I think that that's what the meetings feel like, which can sometimes mean that efficiency is the piece that falls to the wayside a little bit. But yeah, to answer your question about like how work gets delegated, we before we formed or decided to form the co-op, we had all been working together in different capacities, but we had a more of an informal network that we referred to as a collective of language justice workers in Philadelphia and the surrounding area. So when we formed the co-op, a lot of the clients that we have now are organizations that we've been working with for years. And one thing that we consider in delegating work is who has the relationship with that client and who has been working with them, who's familiar with their meeting structures and their vocabulary and the topics that they organize around. So that's one part of it. I would say the next part is like who's available, and if there's more people available than we need, usually client relationship kind of tips the scale, or who has worked more in in who who's more in need of work in that moment, right? If somebody has done a lot of jobs that month and somebody else hasn't, then we tend to uh, prioritize making sure everybody has access to work in a in a given time period. Um, yeah, I don't. Was there other specific questions that I can respond to kind of guide it, or I can also just kind of talk about what Compa is and how we work.
I did have a specific question
Cool.
about how you handle your financial information,
Mm,
both how you are transparent around hourly rates you communicate with clients and what you receive in your paycheck. Um, and just where is your financial information stored? What would it look like to look for it? How often do you look at it together as a group of four?
right.
Anything to share about the finances as a worker owner?
Yeah, I mean, again, we're new and we're learning really like as we go. But we use Zero as our bookkeeping software, and so the four of us have access to Zero, but there's really two of us that are doing the work of like learning how to do bookkeeping every week, going in and making sure everything is is sort of squared. Um, and yeah, in terms of what we communicate to clients, we use a sliding scale to charge um, for interpretation and translation work. And so, just for example, for interpretation, we charge a sliding scale of 85 to $125 an hour. Um, we pay ourselves $75 an hour for interpretation work, and we pay other interpreters that work with Compa and for Compa, but are not member owners. We pay them $80 an hour. Um, so if a client pays on the lower end of the sliding scale, that's really only a very small margin that we're left with for our operating expenses. So we try to work with organizations that have like a range of budgets, and we explain to larger organizations, that by paying this 125 an hour, you're essentially subsidizing organizations that can't pay that much, and um, allows us our operating budget, for our software, for we don't at this point, one day we would love to pay ourselves for administrative work, but we don't currently. Um, it's all, we're meeting every week, and doing a lot of like the unpaid kind of groundwork. Um, but yeah, the hope is that at some point we have enough of those clients with larger budgets and paying on the higher end of the sliding scale that we can um, figure out some way to compensate ourselves for the administrative work, or hire other people, or bring in more members with specific skill sets. Um, yeah, in terms of transparency, I think, we're fully transparent in everything. I think that what it can be if there's anything that is not communicated clearly, it's less about a it's less about transparency and more just about the shifting nature of what we're doing right now, or where we're at right now, and um figuring out what to charge, figuring out how to in our meetings, like how to present the information that we have. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all really interested in doing this. I think we make our money from the interpretation work, more than running the business. So there's really just the matter of what information we have and how do we put it out there. But yeah, our meetings are we meet every week and we give each other updates on the different jobs that we're doing. And like I said, there's two of us that are sort of the finance team. So we recently figured out how to generate profit and loss reports on Zero, and so that's been helpful in uh, making sure that the other members of the co-op are aware of, what we have coming in and what we're paying out. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I was
Yeah.
gonna ask if anyone in the audience had a question for Holly, and I just wanted to explain that on each of our question and answer slides, you'll see a photo that one of the members of the Federation submitted, just so you get a sense of what other co-ops look like besides the ones we're
Cool.
today.
Well,
But if
thank
anyone
you.
in the audience has a question for Holly about how Compa works, now's your chance.
Yeah, I had a quick question. You mentioned admin work being unpaid, which makes a lot of sense. And I wonder how generally admin work is shared amongst the workers and that dynamic. It feels like, yeah, that it equally shared, or do certain people kind of step up in general, like how that looks like.
Yeah, it's hard to say that it's like totally that everyone's doing exactly the same amount because the way that we divide it is different. But I think initially we were interested in, the idea was like, oh, everyone's going to learn how to do all of the administrative jobs, and we're we're going to empower ourselves by knowing how to do everything. Everybody's going to know how to do everything. But once we started actually um like the two of us that uh started doing the finances quickly realized that like this is a lot of learning, and it's not it's not realistic to imagine that like everyone's gonna be able to take all the time that they would need to learn how to do this completely. It's actually maybe, a more realistic time frame would be like we do this for a year or 2 years, or you know to the point where we feel like, okay, now I can teach somebody else how to do this, as opposed to just like letting a different person every month come in and like poke around in the finances. Because none of I was t telling Maureen a little bit about this, but just the kind of nature I think of interpretation is so different than finances. Like someone who's uh oriented towards language work and is interested in interpretation is n- likely not to be like really inclined towards finances and crunching numbers and spreadsheets and things like that. So I don't know that any of the four of us would have been like a perfect fit for the role of finances, but um, the two of us that were open to it and interested in it, we're like, okay, yeah, we'll sit down together, we'll figure it out. And it's been quite chaotic. Yeah, kind of like putting out little fires every couple of weeks and having to like, rely on our network of different folks that have experience with finances. Like, and there's a lot of people within the co-op movement that are really good at finances, and we have a lot of awesome support. And in Philadelphia, there's a group called PACA, Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, that has been incredible in offering, connecting us with different resources and uh, yeah, institutional knowledge. So it's chaotic, but it's fun. It's we're learning and excited about it.
Thank you so much, Holly, for sharing your experience,
Yeah.
even as you're figuring a lot of these systems out in your co-op. There a couple questions came in to the chat,
Yeah. I would take a look.
but if you could try to answer those in the chat, and the one about Pay scale, maybe we'll get into that in the broader question and answer in a little bit after we dig into some financial stuff. But in interest of time, we'll probably move on. Y voy a cambiar al español para el siguiente.
I will change in
No,
English for the
entonces
next
vamos a
section.
hablar
So
ahora
we are
de
going to talk now
evaluaciones,
about
¿no? Específicamente
evaluation,
de evaluaciones de
specifically
miembros,
about members'
porque hay
evaluations,
evaluaciones
because
muchas
there are
veces
evaluations a lot of times
de
that
trabajadores
from
iniciantes
workers
que
that
están,
just
que
started,
recién
that
se juntaron
recently
con la cooperativa, pero estoy
joined the
hablando
cooperative, but I am
de
talking about
evaluaciones con
member
miembros que ya están
evaluation that
miembros dueños, ¿no?
that are
Entonces,
members and owners
cuando
already.
hacemos
When
evaluaciones,
we evaluate,
hemos visto que
we have
esa
seen that
participación en
participation
evaluaciones
in
proactivas, ¿no?
evaluations,
Que
proactive
tienen sus
evaluations
horarios,
that
no
have their
solamente cuando hay
times, their
problemas,
schedule,
pero
not only when they
proactivas,
have
¿no? Son más
troubles, but that they are proactive.
efectivas, ¿no?
It's
Que
more
sí podemos
effective. We
tener
can
discusiones
have
no solamente
discussions
sobre su
not only about
participación
their
en su
participation,
trabajo, ¿no? En
yeah,
su
their
trabajo
work
en la obra
in the
de la cooperativa,
in
pero
the
también en su
cooperative, but
participación
also in their
en las decisiones,
participation in the
en
decisions,
cómo es de ser miembro, ¿no?
how being a
De la cooperativa,
member from the
de,
cooperative,
de las decisiones financieras
from the
para,
financial decisions that we have been
entonces,
talking a lot.
no sé,
I
hemos
don't
visto
know.
que
We
por lo
have
menos
seen that at least
retroalimentación anual
feedback, annually feedback,
es buena idea y
it's a
tal vez
great
más
idea,
frecuente,
and
¿no?
also more frequently.
Entonces,
So
tenemos
we
varias
have
herramientas
different
para eso
tools for that,
que varios grupos han
that different groups
desarrollado en los
have
años
shared
de
in the
cooperativas de
years
trabajadores.
from
Entonces, quería
cooperatives
compartir
and
algunas
workers, but I
aquí.
wanted to share
Tenemos un
some here.
otro mini guía que
We
es
have a mini
específicamente
guide
sobre
that
eso,
is
¿no?
specifically about
Rendir
that,
cuentas,
about
evaluaciones,
evaluations, feedback,
retroalimentación y tiene
and it
algunas
has
herramientas específicas
some
para
specific
formar
tools
o mejorar
to
sus sistemas de
improve their
evaluación.
systems, their
Y también
evaluation
una carpeta que
systems.
acabo de compartir
Also,
aquí
one folder
tiene
that they just
varias
shared here, it
templados, ¿no? Que se
has
puede
different
formar
templates that they can
su sistema
create their
de,
systems
de conocer, ¿no?
to
De los otros
know
miembros, cómo le
the
gusta
other
la
members,
comunicación en
how
la
do they
cooperativa,
like the
cómo,
communication in the cooperative,
qué tipo
how,
de
what
evaluación,
type of
qué tipo de
evaluation, what type of
retroalimentaciones
feedback
se recibe mejor
are
y
they
todo eso.
receiving
Entonces,
better, and all of that.
todo eso de
Only
verdad
that, it
quería
really,
compartir. Si tienen preguntas sobre
we
evaluaciones
can, if
u
they
otras
have
herramientas o historias,
different
también me
tools,
dicen.
they are welcome here.
Parece que hay un problema
I
de
think there is a
interpretación
problem
acá.
in interpretation.
Okay.
We are checking that. Give us a moment, please.
Bueno, aquí hay una foto de un
So
miembro
this
de
is a
la
picture
Federación de
of a
Pecos,
member from
que yo sé que
Pecos
tienen un
cooperative
sistema
that I know they
muy
have a
activo y
system, an
visual.
active
Tienen su
system, a
sistema de
visual
evaluación
system.
visual en
They have a
su fábrica
visual
de
evaluation at
pickles,
their
¿no?
factory of
Y,
pickles.
y lo tienen,
And
esa persona
that
tiene su
person
evaluación con
has
esta, ¿no? Evaluación de
evaluation with
par
this
con
person
esta
or
persona y
pair
entonces,
evaluation with
pues,
this
entiendo que
person,
así
and
esta cooperativa en este
it's
sentido. Bueno,
good.
preguntas, algo
Questions?
para compartir. Si no,
Something
podemos
to
seguir
share?
con...
If not, we can continue.
Bien, seguimos entonces, Maureen, con
Okay,
cultura,
we
¿no?
continue with culture.
Sí, me encantaría. Voy a hablar en español
Yes,
primero.
I will like to, I would love it. I will be speaking in
Y
Spanish
para
now,
que
and
sea traducida,
so it
salió
can
una
be
pregunta en el chat.
translated. There was
Si
a
sería
question in the
posible
chat
compartir el
if there
enlace
would
al
be
mini guía
possible to share
para
a link to the
evaluación.
mini guide for
Yeah.
evaluation that you referenced.
Yeah, the accountability mini guide is the one that has all the evaluation tools and explanations in it. Yeah, I'll paste it again.
Vale, todos nuestros mini guías
Great. All of our
están
mini
dispuestos
guides
en
are
inglés y en
available
español.
in English and in
Son
Spanish.
gratuitos
They are free
y son bien útiles.
and they are
Entonces, vamos
very
a hablar de
helpful.
cultura y
We are
conexión
going to talk
porque
about
obviamente
culture and
nadie se va a
connection
reunir
because
a una
obviously
reunión de
they are not
cooperativa.
going to join a cooperative
Así que
of
quiero
uh,
preguntarles
John
antes de leer
Cooperative. So I want
esta
to ask you
diapositiva
before we
si tu
read this
cooperativa
slide, if
tiene
your
alguna
cooperative
forma
has a form
retiro o actividad
for
social como
retirement
comida
or
compartida,
social, like sharing food,
celebraciones, fiestas
celebrations,
que han hecho,
parties that they have done
que
before,
se han visto
that have
un
seen
cambio en la
that
cultura
you
de la
have seen a
cooperativa, a
change
lo
in the
mejor
culture
como,
of the cooperative,
no
maybe.
sé,
For
antes
example,
solamente tuvimos
before
reuniones
we
sobre
just
las
had
finanzas,
meetings
pero
about
después de empezar
financial
reuniones
area, but
organizadas nos dimos
then
cuenta de
we
que ya
noticed
más
that
personas
more people
participan
was
porque estamos dándoles
participating because
comida,
we're
algo
giving
así.
them food, something
Si
like that.
hay ejemplos de
There, if you have examples
mejores
of
prácticas, lo que sea,
parties,
quiero
best
escuchar
practices, I
qué
would
hacen
like to
para
hear from
aumentar
you. What do
una
you
cultura
do
de
to
amistad y
increase
respeto
a
dentro
culture
de
of
la cooperativa
friendship
tuya.
and
Pueden
respect?
quitarse de mute o
You can
compartirlo.
unmute yourself or share it in the chat.
Crystal compartió en el chat.
Chriselle sharing the chat that we have
que incluye la comida,
retreats that
y
include
conlleva un
food,
día de
which include
aprendizaje,
meals along with a date of
otro día
learning
de
and
socializar.
socializing.
¿Dónde se lo hacen, Crystal?
Where do you do it,
En su lugar de
Crystal?
negocio, en un
In
parque,
your
en casa
place,
de
in your
alguien.
business place, in a park, in someone's house?
Y veo Guadalupe compartió en la cooperativa
I see that
Radiate.
Guadalupe
Tenemos 2
share in
retiros cada año y nos sirve para
Co-op,
conocernos más del lado humano de
and
nuevo deporte y
she
financiero
thinks
cada
that it's
3
very
meses.
important to meet in
Esto nos
person. So
ayuda
there's
mucho
a
en la
human
transparencia.
also side of the co-op, and everybody gets to see each other.
Me parece que los
And
retiros son
also, it's a good way of
ejemplos
doing
más
round
populares
tables where
en
there
este
can be
grupo.
transparency. And
También
in this
he
group,
visto,
I've
Lily,
seen
todas
Lily,
las reuniones tienen
all meetings
se empiezan con una pregunta personal
start with a
antes de
personal
empezar a
question
hablar de temas de
before
negocio.
we start talking about
Kate
business.
Eubank de Ayora
Kate
dice
Eubank
que
from
somos
Aura
trabajadores de un negocio
says that
virtual, así que
they
tenemos
work
reuniones
remotely,
semanales de
and
media
so they
hora
have weekly
en
meetings,
que revisamos
half an hour
a
where
ver
they go through
cómo estamos haciendo,
just
contestamos preguntas un
how they're
poco
doing, they're checking
hecho
in,
reprimidos o bien graves y compartimos lo que se puede esperar de la semana que
and
viene.
they
Se han
share
convertido
what
en
do
un
they
lugar de
looking forward,
conexión
what they expect
muy
for
lindo.
the following week,
Wow,
their work for the
tienen muchas
following week.
prácticas ustedes.
Wow, you
Prince
guys
John dice
have a
que
lot
su
of talks and
cooperativa tiene
meetings.
reuniones
Prince John
mensuales
says that
y se
he
los
his job,
mejoraron
they
cuando
have
empezaron a tomar
many talks
también esa práctica de
and
check-in,
meetings, and
de
they also
preguntar
practice
cómo están
doing
sintiendo
some checking.
ustedes sobre los sentimientos,
And just they
agradeciendo
focus
uno al
on,
otro
each other's
antes de
feelings,
empezar
how people are
formalmente la
feeling
reunión.
before
Monse
they
de
start formally the
Santander
meeting.
dice que celebran aniversarios,
Monse says that they celebrate
cumpleaños y tienen una
anniversaries,
reunión cada
birthdays,
2 meses,
and they have a staff meeting
perdón,
every
cada
2
dos
weeks.
semanas en el lugar de trabajo.
And,
Yugi Sumana Dilcia, si también quieres compartir algo de la cultura.
Umana, I don't know if you want to share.
Sí, gracias. Hola a todos. Nosotras lo
Hello,
que hacemos es
everyone.
que
Thank you.
cuando
So what
trabajamos
we
en
do
lugares
is
lejanos
that when we
utilizamos un
go
auto
to places that
y le
are far
pagamos un
away
extra a
from
la persona
our
que maneja y al
meeting
acompañante con
place,
el auto y ahí aprovechamos para
we
socializar.
usually go all
Y
together in the
somos
car, and
madrinas de quinceañeras, somos madrinas de
which is basically
bautizo,
talk,
participamos en
during
fiestas
the trip.
de las
Basically, it's a
compañeras
trip, and
de
we
la
celebrate
cooperativa. Eso nos
quinceañeras,
ayuda
we
mucho
celebrate
además de los
birthdays,
retiros.
and We are there for each other in all these important times of their lives. So if you could please introduce yourself, because it could be that not everybody knows who you are. So if you could please let us know who you are. I am Ula, so I'm from the Coop Escobar Mágica. It's a cleaning co in Maryland, Virginia. Most of us live in Virginia, but most of us we work and live in Virginia. Thank you so much for participating. And I also wanted to mention that um, I wanted to share that a business is important, but also I wanted to emphasize how you need to set a difference to like a regular business, right? For example, you could post some signs with your logos. You can have a structure in your committees, in your meetings, and then have things that are not expected to be found in a regular working place, right? For example, I went to Madison, Wisconsin, and I went in the co-op that is called Union Co-op. I saw that they had flags of the LGBTQ flag, and they were beautiful, big, where the mechanics work. And I've never seen such a thing that a place like that will have this type of flags, and they said that they were proud of showing their values in the working place, and also UNICAP had big signs saying stating their mission and vision. And they told me that when they are holding meetings and they get into like a hot discussion or argument, they always refer to that big sign saying, we agree with that mission and vision. So we never lose sight of this, something that is inside, always in front of us, so we don't forget what our mission and vision was. And so keep in mind that the changes that we want to do or they want to do is in the community, not only, it's not personally, but also in the community. So if you could please write in the chat any other ways that you make your working place different to a regular working place.
Me parece que ya tienen toda la cultura arreglada,
I
entonces
think that your culture is fine then. So let's move on
segunda sección de
to the second section. And then if you come up with other ideas or things that you didn't share before, please, you have the chance to do so.
English. And yeah, very shortly we're gonna hear from Aorta and some things they've been doing. So, but I wanted to share a little bit. So yeah, we've been focused a lot on the governance, decisions, culture kind of components, but there's the shop floor components too, right? Those do factor in. So I want to just share some of the kind of research that's been done around disengagement in workplaces in general, because it has an impact. Uh, and so there lots of ways of organizing it, but let's see if we could see these types of disengagement, right? Or engagement. So contentment, right? It might be something we see a lot, right? Where people are just content and not really engaging too much. They do their jobs. They don't really engage too much beyond what they really need to do, and that's not the kind of engagement we're looking for an active co-op, right, or democratic workplace. We might also see mistrust and infighting, right? This is a common thing we see, from multiple different places, but it might be, really pointing out some underlying issues that we'll get into. Then we might see pseudo engagement, right? People are just engaged to kind of put on a show for a leader in the co-op to garnish their favor or something. Again, not the kind of engagement we're looking at. And studies have shown that there's really only like 25% of people in workplaces that feel really that it's a place of engagement, of regular ongoing engagement with mutual aid and support and um, common problem solving and feeling empowered and sharing values. And so there's a lot of work to be done. And here are some things that, might be useful to do around for each of these. So for contentment, right, you can acknowledge that people are just in a place of complacency with honest conversations. You can switch up the projects, rotate, what people are working on, um, add new projects into the mix. For mistrust and infighting, you might need to change leadership. As a leader in your co-op, you might be thinking, oh, it's these people that are fighting with each other, but it actually might be your leadership style, and you might want to look at that. And you can also offer more autonomy. Maybe it's because the management or the leadership team is a little bit too overbearing and not allowing enough autonomy. Um, let's see. And then providing real methods of feedback and appreciation. And for pseudo engagement, you want to shift it from people showing off their individual, I'll get it done at the expense of other people in the team, and really set team goals and set reward teamwork when that happens, not rewarding individual, success. And again, we talked about retreats, but that can be a space to really engage. And when you have engagement, make sure you're rotating leadership, you have feedback, proactive feedback, like we talked about, and celebrating that engagement. So those are some uh, tips on the operations side. And so we really wanted to, bring it back to co-op specifically and bring it back to especially member decision making and involvement, and think about some of these underlying root causes. And we've, talked a little bit about conflict already, but that can be such a huge component of this, right? Tensions that people have tried to raise, or don't feel comfortable raising. Why don't they feel comfortable raising, this issue? How can you create safer spaces to bring up tensions before they're full-blown conflict? When they do bring up something, is their input ignored or really taken into account? And then once there's been input received, is leadership really following through on those changes that have been identified? And of course, power is underlying all of this, and I'll leave it to Kate from Aorta to bring in some of those components, I'm sure, and along with unresolved conflicts that stay stale and keep people just, oh, that my workplace is a place of conflict, or engagement in decisions is the place of conflict. I'll do my job, but I don't want to engage on the, in those in deciding the annual budget, because I just know it'll be too conflictual, and we have conflict avoidance, or we just have, not been heard and feel that we won't have the conflicts addressed. So I wanted to yeah, to bring Kate on here and ask you a few questions about how you do it in your co-op or co-ops that you've supported, because I know Eorta works with, co-ops all over the place. So I want to dive into the conflict stuff right away. Often conflict avoidant, but here I'm going to go right there. And I'd love to hear from you how conflicts or tensions have shown up in your work, right? And have they been acknowledged, addressed, or maybe left unacknowledged? And any stories around this would be great to hear.
Yeah. All of the above. They've been acknowledged, addressed, and left unaddressed. So for a little bit of context, Aorta is currently, we're 10 worker owners. We've got 2 folks in candidacy, so soon we'll be 12 worker owners. We are a facilitation co-op, so there's a lot of like facilitation, conflict, democratic decision-making nerds in the co-op. Our structure is we have differentiated roles, and we have like rotating a sort of like leadership and coordination team that rotates. But we don't have sort of like managers and folks who are being supervised. We make a lot of decisions collectively. So I think when I think about sort of like how conflict and tension has showed up at Aorta and also in a lot of the organizations that we work with and support through that, I kind of think about two buckets of it. One is sort of like big group conflict, tension. It's often related to group culture and communication. It's like one of those snarls that the whole organization is aware of and involved in. Maybe it's about disagreement over a big decision or sort of over like values and strategic direction. And then there's like conflicts between or tension between individuals, right? Or in smaller teams. And we often surface and address those in slightly different ways. So large group conflicts and tensions have at Aorta sometimes been surfaced intentionally, right? By folks who are like, hey, there's something funky going on here. What can we talk about this? Like, this feels not right to me. And like, can we have a conversation? And we sort of like self-structure maybe a series of organizational conversations. Maybe if it comes up within the context of a decision-making process, we slow down the decision-making process to make space to like sort out the conflict. Sometimes we also like try to access support for ourselves or reflection individually before we do the whole group conflict dance to try to make sure that we're sort of like showing up well. And then sometimes also, you know, like conflict surfaces sort of by surprise, right? Like we didn't realize that we had some sort of like deep disagreement about something, or something happens that is like, wow, that was not okay. And we need to address it in the moment. And we kind of rely on some of those like democratic worker skills that we're all always trying to develop, you know, that I think in some ways, Matt, you spoke to in terms of evaluation, right? The ability to bridge and to sort of like hold my own perspective and also really hear my comrades and the co-op's perspective. But we've also definitely had situations where like we had 2 years ago, there was a lot of tension in the co-op around some like racially charged different decisions and like different ways that labor was impacting different workers based on privilege in terms of class and or race. And the ways that, and we finally decided we needed to resource ourselves externally. And so we brought in external facilitators to do like both training, but also to do some like really deep conversation over 6 months for us to get us back into the kind of like proactive caucus, racially based caucus practice that we had before, that had been a like more proactive way to address those kinds of dynamics within our co-op. And that was really supportive as well. So sort of like a range of things.
See, folks, even conflict facilitators need support in conflict facilitation sometimes. So don't hesitate to reach out. There's a follow-up question in the chat here from Veronica around do you have an ongoing conflict resolution committee? You know, how does that work? What kind of documentation do you have to facilitate the documentation of incidents as they come up and grievances probably? And then what role does the operating agreement or bylaws have in those conversations?
Oh yeah, such a good question. Thank you, Veronica. We don't have a specific conflict resolution committee. What we have in our structure is we have a personnel team, which is me and my role, and then one worker owner who's sort of elected, and sometimes it rotates. And part of our responsibility, so we're responsible for things like holding annual evaluation processes, and we are the folks who are responsible if a grievance comes up, it comes to us. But also we do a lot of work sort of tending relationships in the co-op. And responding to conflicts and tensions before they come to the place where like the bylaws have to get involved. And making sure that sort of folks are communicating feedback or disagreement directly if possible. So sometimes we hold space for two co-op members to have a difficult conversation with each other. Sometimes it looks like doing coaching with a co-op member around like, I really didn't like how that person showed up in that meeting, and doing some coaching to be like, okay, how do you want to bring that to them? Like, what's the way to give feedback that is actionable, that is kind, that is direct, that is self-reflective? So that's sort of our structure for holding that. We also resource ourselves with an external coach whose name is Sheena Wadawan, and she is a like magical unicorn genius coach who works with workers and organizations to also sort of like help folks to do that ongoing reflection, tending, sort of being like, how do I orient to showing up well in a cooperative where there's always going to be conflict? Like that's just a part of how we figure things out, and disagreement is really important, and we want to disagree well. And so making sure to sort of like resource ourselves in those ways in an ongoing way, rather than waiting to tend to like individual or team conflict when it gets to the point where like structures and, you know, like bylaws have to be involved. So we've not actually engaged our bylaws very much in resolving conflict in the 7 years I've been at Aorta, mostly because we take care of it earlier on, further upstream.
Right, but good to have it when things really hit the fan, right?
Yeah, glad to have a backstop when you need it.
Process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just going to address another question in the chat about sharing external support for conflict resolution. You now know about Aorta. They're a great resource. And we have other members that provide that service that we have mapped by state in our service provider directory. So you can go there and click, specifically on the conflict mediation and see some of the members that offer that. Great. I have another question for you, Kate. So a lot of what's underneath this is power dynamics, right? And dominant voices can have a real impact on larger engagement. Can you share any structures or practices that you have or have seen at other co-ops that really prevent dominant voices from silencing the less prominent voices? As specific as possible would be great in terms of like practices or ongoing, resources for that.
Yeah. So I'm the first thing, which is silly because I work for a facilitation co-op, is we have a facilitator. And I feel like, we have, so one of the things that we do for ourselves internally is like every meeting has a facilitator and every proposal has a facilitator, and that person's job is to kind of like think about how to structure the conversation and then actually hold the container for the conversation in a way that balances voices and perspectives, that sort of like reduces barriers to participation and also really listens for like what are the quieter voices or dissenting perspectives that need to be lifted up. And I think my partner makes fun of me because he's like, you now have been working at Aorta for 7 years and you have zero patience for poorly facilitated meetings. And I'm like, I really, really do, because so much of some voices dominating and some voices not being heard is because everybody's looking around to be like, who's gonna like rein in the thing, who's gonna take us back on track. And when you have someone who is holding facilitation and responsible for doing that, I think that it really supports. So we do a lot of that. All of our internal meetings are facilitated. We also do a lot of thinking about sort of like engagement doesn't look just one way, right? Like when we talk about dominant voices, I think often it's because we only have one pathway for people to express their opinion. And often it's the like, somebody puts a question out and the first person to respond, like the first person who like hears it, thinks about it, formulates a response, is the voice that comes in. And folks who process information differently, or who like need some time to think about and formulate their response, or who would rather share in a different format, often kind of like get sidelined. And so we've developed a lot of different ways that we put out a proposal, and there's multiple different ways for people to engage or give input that doesn't rely on, especially for those of us who are like quiet introverts, being able to be the first person to be like, I have an opinion. So that's also a part of it. And then I think also the awareness to dynamics of power and oppression within our co-op, and the ability to kind of sit in that discomfort and start from the place of proactive tending to those conversations, I think also enables us to think about, when we're having a decision-making conversation, which voices do we really need to be listening to in a given moment? And are they showing up in the room? And to like slow down if that's not what's happening, and really kind of tend to what's underneath that.
For sure. There is a question in the chat about Robert's Rules of Order as it relates to meeting facilitation, and maybe a little bit more broadly, different types of meeting processes that, if you want to speak to that.
I think that the important thing is two things. One is that whatever the process is and the decision-making process is, that everybody agrees to it, right? That it's like a shared, like, yep, we all want to make decisions in this way. We all own it together as a co-op, because otherwise you've sort of like, folks are disengaged from the start, right? If people are like, this is not my kind of decision making. So kind of doing some work around like, how do we make decisions together? The how of how we do it is important. I think is really important. And then I think also being aware that many forms of decision making can get like really technical, right? Robert's Rules is one of them that like I struggle with often, because I'm like, I really love to nerd out on a system, but everybody needs to feel skilled and competent in using the decision-making tools that the group is using. And so if we're using a tool, whether it's Robert's Rules of Order or it's, like a specific form of consensus, and not everybody feels like they really understand and are skilled in how that tool works and how they can engage with it, it's going to immediately like leave behind anybody who's like, I didn't go to college, I don't know how Robert's Rules of Order work, or like, I only just started working in a co-op, I don't understand how this consensus model works. Those folks are not going to be able to engage in the same way as other folks, and the voices of people who understand how to use this system are going to dominate.
Well said. Thank you. Yeah, a lot more could be said there for sure. But I do want to get to the financial decision component. It's underlying a lot of things in our co-ops, right? Who makes the decisions about office decor is one thing, but then who makes decisions about our annual budget, right? And that can hold a lot of uh, make or break whether you feel like you're a full member of the co-op or not, if you're engaged in the finances. So anyway, Kate's coworker Neely made this great tool that really helps co-ops do this participatory budgeting, right? And take a peek at it. I shared it again in the chat here. But if you, Kate, could share a little bit about any financial disengagement you've seen in your co-op and how you've used this to help address it, or how someone could use this in their co-op.
Yeah, totally. Neely is a wizard. And she built this based on like all of the different challenges that we had with financial disengagement in our co-op over years, right? So I think about 4 years ago, we did a like initial financial training with ABC, because a bookkeeping cooperative, because part of what we recognized was that we all vote together on our budget and we all develop it together, but that those of us who had grown up with different kinds of access to learning about money or had worked in nonprofits with budgets, and so we're like, I know what a profit and loss statement is. We're so much more comfortable engaging. And then there were workers who were like, money makes me so uncomfortable, I want to hide under the bed. Or workers who were like, I never, like money, either you have it or you don't. And, like, I don't even know how to engage with this conversation. So we started from the sort of like what Holly was saying, we started from the place of all of our worker owners need to have a baseline level of knowledge about money and about how finances in a co-op work. And also we need to have some of the difficult conversations about class and about our feelings about money and like what it means and the value of our labor. And those are like ongoing, right? Those are always conversations. But Neely built this because it was like, first we needed to learn some things about money. And then we needed to really find a way to be like, our decisions about our budget are ours and we have to live with them. But it's easier to live with them if we've all participated in making them, even when we don't like what we have to do with the decision, right? Like, even if we're like, we can't raise anybody's pay this year, but we all made it together. So this tool is, we don't sort of like every year go through this entire tool to do our budget. But the team that's working on guiding the co-op through the budget kind of like pulls out what are the pieces of what we need to make a decision at this moment about, we got to make some cuts. So how are we going to prioritize expenses? Or we're thinking about like 5 different ways that we can generate revenue next year. And we want to figure out like, what's the one that we are all willing to really hustle for. And so this tool, I think like by itself is great, but it was really that tool combined with the like hard conversations in our co-op and folks being willing to like learn or be like, I don't understand this. Can someone talk me through it? That sort of together have led to us having a much stronger ability to like sort out difficult conversations about money or like build a budget together. And it's still a work in progress. We had a set of tough meetings last week that was like, we got to be really conservative with a couple of things about money right now until we see what's going on in the next couple of months. And so like, how do we want to do that? But it was such a like shift from 4 years ago when half of us would have run and hid and half of us would have been like, so it's definitely facilitated the conversations in our co-op a lot.
That's so key. The right tools, the right processes, but honest, making space for honest conversation and sharing that vulnerability. Yeah, for each of these areas of disengagement, right? So I'd love to hear any other, thoughts about other tools or approaches you use or things you've seen or stories you want to share, anything around these causes of disengagement. And then we'll take questions from everyone or other thoughts from folks, more broadly on this whole topic. So yeah, but Kate, anything else that jumps out at you when you see these kind of root causes? Oh yeah, that's something we've addressed or trying to address or see, and here's a story or a tool or a resource.
Yeah. I wish we have a democratic decision-making zine that's coming out next week. And so I'm like, I wish I had it in my hand to, but I think about sort of the ways that as a like HR and organizational culture nerd, I'm like, I think that a lot of member engagement isn't always about the like really big decisions, but is about the little things every day. It's about like, in that meeting, was there space for me? In that smaller decision, was I able to move the group? Or like, what kind of like, does my organization give me opportunities to like really have input about my working conditions? And so I think, like just thinking about all of the ways that we can build in collaborating and consulting each other about our workplaces as we go. And that doesn't mean that, because I ask you for your opinion, I always have to take it, but being really transparent about that and making it a real practice, I think, instead of just like at the quarterly meeting, we really want everybody to participate, is really important for building that culture. And then the other thing I think about, and this might be wrong to say in a co-op space, is that we hopefully we're all in it for the long term. And that means that we like have seasons and waves, right? And so I'm like, sometimes I'm like, oh, that co-owner's kind of disengaged right now. And sometimes I'm like, okay, well, like, what do we need to do? And sometimes I'm like, they've got like a really intense thing going on, you know, their parents are dying, or like, you know, I live in Minneapolis and was like, for the last 4 months, I have not been very engaged in my workplace. And my coworkers were like, how can we support you to be where you need to be right now? And thanks for showing up and keeping getting the job done in between. And so I think that also like engagement looks different for everyone, and it can ebb and flow. And our goal is like for the long term, our co-ops are thriving because many of us are really engaged. And that's a kind of like care and love we can give each other, is to be like, it's okay if you're not paying really close attention right now, we got you. And we know you'll come back when it's time. And that's been something that's like helped me keep going at my co-op. And I'm like, I have 10 more years here at least. So, but I know sometimes I'll need to dip out, and that's okay.
Any questions for Kate? Um, Veronica has another question. Could you share any information or resources linked to how to facilitate important conversations and delicate conversations when the co-op is crossing in the transition, an organizational transition, and members feel like doubt or uncertainty?
Like, grab and go resource. I don't have a tip sheet for that. Yeah, it's so hard. I think so. I'm thinking about like big transitions we've faced at Aorta, right? And how did we get through them? And part of it is that we had been, you know, like we're relying on the work that we've been doing steadily over time to be in relationship with each other. And we're facilitating conversations where we can like be with discomfort and disagreement or grief about change and transition. And we're also each like really trying to show up in I have a really smart coworker, Dana Peterson, who talks about the like mindsets and habits of a democratic worker. And has a like tool on it, but hasn't finished polishing it yet. But like thinking about, it's both about how the organization shows up and the container that we build. And also it's about how each of us shows up as, you know, like so many of us have experiences of being really disempowered in our workplaces, in our past workplaces around change or transition. And we can like really default into that like powerless, I can't make it better, like this is just happening to me kind of place. And so I also think about like what are the ways that we can facilitate our co-ops through transitions that like invite or require folks to show up in ways that are really about standing in our own power and our own agency, in a way that is also like connected to and collaborative with each other, and not just individual. But that's not like, here's a great way to do it in the like 6 months of the specific transition. That's more of the like, that's what we're all here doing as co-ops. I don't think I have a good answer, Veronica.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for all this information, though, Kate. Really appreciate you jumping in and sharing all these insights. And I wanted to make space, Holly, if you have any thoughts on these underlying root cause topics or that question around large transition, feel free to chime in here. Yeah,
As I was listening, I was, sort of thinking about our co-op and how it might apply. But I think that, like I said, the fact that we started from this really small core group and, we knew each other really well before starting the co-op, I think is a little different than a lot of co-ops. And I think that what I heard, I'm hearing from Kate and what I know about aorta, it's like those, you know, ha facilitating a conversation like that, where people are coming from different backgrounds and different, we're all from kind of have different backgrounds in Compa, but the fact that we, knew each other and kind of found each other and sought each other out specifically to start this co-op, I think means that some of those things are, there's conflict and there's things that we've had to talk about, but it feels like having a conversation with a friend as opposed to trying to, find the language to have a conversation with a coworker. I am curious to see how that shifts for us as we bring in new members and um, expand and do more of this work with folks that we don't know as intimately. So I, all that's to say is I don't feel like we have a lot to offer in that way. But that being close and having our relationships rooted in friendship, I think is, makes those conversations possible and allows us to resolve conflict in a very organic kind of way.
Thank you. We have a little bit of time, maybe one more burning question if it's out there. Otherwise, Maureen has some important announcements to do. All right, pass it back to you, Maureen.
Thank you. I'm going to finish in English to say that we have a lot of events coming up, and I wanted to remind everyone listening that if you want more targeted support on navigating these questions, obviously consider working with any of the mediators or consultants that you can find in our directory, including Aorta. And also, the Co-op Clinic has so many worker owners who are peer advisors who can help navigate these positions and questions with your co-op as well. So consider scheduling with us just to learn about what else is out there. Our upcoming events this Monday is an event that is unfortunately only in English, but we can share resources if you specifically request them for participating in this campaign in Spanish, which is about labor neutrality. And what we are organizing around is having cooperatives as employers supporting workers' rights to organize and build conditions for honest collective problem solving. So if you're interested in learning how to include labor neutrality as a core practice in the co-op movement, it's a free event on Monday. And then as a reminder, we have a Union Co-ops Council space, which is also meeting later this month to just learn more about the relationship between unions and co-ops. If you are in a cannabis co-op or know anyone interested in forming one, we have a specific peer network space to meet those industry-specific needs. We have a Black Cooperator peer network meeting on Wednesday, March 25th. We have a media co-ops peer network meeting Monday, March 30th. And though I didn't include it here, I wanted to say that if you're leaving today's webinar feeling a little overwhelmed because you're like, now I know I need policies on everything from evaluation to staff retreats with meals, and I need a check-in question, and I've never asked a check-in question before, it's okay. We also have the Ops and HR peer network, which is right now mostly a listserv, and it's a really helpful place to ask people in other co-ops who are also in charge of addressing their co-op's operations, administration, human resources, financial management, bookkeeping, personnel policy, hiring and firing, all the stuff that might be scary. You have a community in the Ops and HR peer network. So I will put that information in the chat as well. And I'll end by saying we have the Worker Co-op Conference, which we do every 2 years. And that is a great place to learn directly from worker owners and as worker owners on this call for you to teach. So we'll be opening the application for sessions this month. It'll close next month. So if you have something that you think your co-op would thrive at teaching. Please submit a session. We'll give more details when the RFP opens, but the conference itself will be September 25th to 26th in Boston. If you're tuning in from somewhere like New Mexico and you think, that's where I live, there's no way I'm going to make it to Boston this year, or you don't feel safe traveling this year, we're also encouraging groups to organize local satellite events to support virtual access and local information sharing. So please check out conference.coop to stay up to date with the progression of the worker conference and what you can do locally if you won't be making it to Boston. And my cat's here to say that we're at time. So I hope that you all found this useful. Please give us feedback so we know how to better tailor co-op clinic programs to your co-op's needs. And please fill out an interpretation evaluation form if you accessed interpretation today. Thank you so much to Community Language Co-op for providing interpretation, Holly and Compa for sharing your experiences, Kate and Aorta for sharing your experiences, Matt for co-facilitating, and like all 40 something of you that showed up and all 100 that are watching this recording. We really appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Y gracias a los intérpretes and all the staff that made this possible. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.